We are live. Hello, hello, and welcome to Literary Roadhouse Book Club. Today we're discussing Milkman by Anna Burns. I'm Anise, joined by Gerald Hornsby and Colette Sartor. Hey, guys.
Hey.
I was almost going to change our names for the intro to be obnoxious, like host 1, host 2, host 3 or something, because since this book has no names.
Yes. Very good.
So,
well,
at least there weren't difficult names to remember.
No. And in a way, everyone did have names. We all know who Tablets Girl is. We all know who Somebody McSomebody is. So
yes. Somebody
McSomebody was one of my favorites. I mean, the name, not necessarily the character.
Right. The character was a terrible human being. So, since we've already given a taste of how difficult this book is going to be, just because there's no names, I vote we call the narrator Middle Sister. So.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah. She has 1,000 names. Yeah. So what are your guys' overall impression of the book? We'll start with Gerald.
Oh, God, I hoped you wouldn't start with me.
I'm starting.
Okay. I've sort of written a review, and the review has listed my annoyances, and then it lists the things I found charming, which are exactly the same things. So it's kind of like for instance, the style annoys me, and yet it's charming at the same time, and I sort of can't resist it. It's the whole thing. I feel really stuck in the middle with this, and everything that I find annoying is also really good. So I can see why it won the Booker Prize, because it's a challenging book. It's difficult to read in a way, but you get such a lot out of it, and it's so clever, so well crafted.
Yeah. Colette?
I agree. It's incredibly well crafted, and I actually, this is the first book I've ever read that I actually enjoyed the quirkiness of the syntax, and when I first started reading, I thought, oh, this is so much easier to read than I thought it would be. And the prose is deceptively simple, and yet it's incredibly complex and difficult. Like this was a book I could read. I had to read it in chunks and then put it down, and I would read it and enjoy it, and then just get exhausted and have to put it down. And I finished it. Like we talked about yesterday, I had 100 pages left, and I read that in one spurt and was exhausted at the end. And so I can't necessarily say, like, this is not a book I would read again. And there are books that I say I would read again and again. Like Sing Unburied Sing, I will read again. I will not read Milkman again. But I can't say I didn't like it. I did. I found it is particularly the historical context and the whole concept of what it was to be a woman in these times, and what it was to be just exist and to live in such violent times. I found that all fascinating, but it was a frustrating book. It was. I wanted to be able to get through it and enjoy it the whole time I read it, and I can't say that I did.
Yeah. Real quick, Colette, you suddenly had a little bit of an echo. Do you hear that too, Gerald?
Yeah.
So
I did.
Yeah. Can you? We didn't have it before. Can you just make sure that everything's coming in through your headphones?
Yeah.
Am I coming in through your headphones right now when you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Weird.
Oh, yeah. And I heard that too. All of a sudden. Yeah. I'll try turning it down even more.
Yeah, but it must be something else.
Either.
Your Audacity is probably fine. It's probably something with Hangouts.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. Because all of a sudden I heard it too.
Do you have Hangouts open twice?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I only have Hangouts open once. I'll close everything else that I need to.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I heard it too.
Sometimes you sound fine. It like comes and goes.
Okay.
Ugh.
Hopefully the track in Audacity is fine. Anyway.
Okay.
So, the more I think about it, so I feel like when I finished reading the book, I felt more positive than negative, but there were definitely some stuff I was just like, wow, that didn't need to be so difficult in those ways. But the more I thought about it, the more I appreciated it. And two things changed my appreciation of the prose. One is, so as I was trying to take notes in my desperation, I'm staring at a blank page. I don't know where to start. So I blast social media like, help, people who have read this. And a couple of our listeners replied. And one of them, Tracy, she sent an audio version of it that she found on YouTube. And when I'm hearing it, it doesn't sound difficult at all. It sounds like Grace from Alias Grace. I don't know if you guys have seen that on Netflix. It's on the Margaret Atwood book. It's great.
That's my favorite book.
Yeah, and
I love Alias Grace.
If you watch the Netflix,
yeah,
is it on Netflix? It's somewhere. I think it's Netflix. If you watch it, the way that Grace speaks, that's how this thing sounds. And I'm like, it's just so Irish, but it's also not though, because I started like analyzing some of the like phrases, and I was trying to explain to a friend why it's difficult, and I just pulled one tiny little phrase, which was, because in that manner easier it was too. That just sounds backwards. We would naturally want to say, because it was easier in that manner too, right? Yeah. She flips it. And that one little flip, once in a while, is no big deal. But when it's in a sentence with 7 dependent clauses, 3 independent clauses, then all of a sudden you're in some sort of like labyrinth of words and phrases and nested clauses where you're just like, I can't remember. There was one section where she was talking about the worries, where she used it to refer to the worries for like a page and a half, that he started to wonder, like, is it still the worries or has it moved on to something else? So that's what made it so challenging, which is purely on like the syntax level. Like, just like, on the one hand, I appreciate that her voice was respected and an editor didn't like beat down every single instance of this. But on the other hand, is there a point where an editor can say, look, I know like this is your very unique voice and it's refreshing and it's new and it's both funny and horrifying at the same time, but like, just for readability, can you like, yeah,
exactly. And even things like, I realized, because it's very conversational, and you're right, if I had heard it, and I realized when I was really in a groove and really just completely into it, it was because I had gotten into the groove of hearing it in my head, of hearing the voice. But if I really sat down and looked at the page and realized, oh my God, this paragraph goes on for a page and a half, I got exhausted as a reader. So it was really one of those, if I was not completely immersed, if I was very aware of the fact that I was reading and that the sentence was, a paragraph long and that the paragraph was a page and a half long, and then it got exhausting. Yeah. Then it got very difficult to read when you became aware of how complex even the syntax was, and also everything was interior. There weren't a lot of, there were scenes, but every scene was interrupted by so much interiority and so much context that it was, and there was very little dialogue. So you didn't have those natural markers that we wait for as readers to help us through the difficult bits.
It's funny you bring that up because it reminded me of American Pastoral. I was reading an interview with Anna Burns, and they asked her, who do you think is the most underrated writer? She said Philip Roth. She's a huge Philip Roth fan. And I'm like, I see it.
Oh my God. And I'm so glad, you know what? Yeah. That makes so much sense, because I didn't want to say that, because I'm like, maybe it's just me and I'm just grouping writers together who are very interior. But I'm like, God, this reminds me so much of Philip Roth. And I wasn't going to say it. I'm so glad you said that.
I'm sure she'd take it as a compliment. I'm sure if she listened to this after we said, please make reading easier, once we said, you sound like Philip Roth, you'd be like, yes, because it's a writer she admires. So
yeah, it is that. And it is, and you sometimes forget what she's talking about because the sentences go on so long, and you go with it for a little while, and then you suddenly think, hang on, what were we talking about? Because she's sort of gone nested and little little references to something else. I'll give her something. She was consistent, so that voice that she has and that style she has was consistent throughout the book. So I think as you said, Colette, once you're sort of into it and hearing the voice, then it's a lot better. It's and on one hand, I think it's really interesting and fascinating and clever. And on the other hand, I say, why are you making it so difficult? There's enough of a story here. There is enough interest without burying it under difficult writing style.
Mm. So I think we're all in agreement that it's challenging, it's fun, but also why. So like I wanted to start there. I wanted to get that out of the way because every review that we read and that I've read online basically does that first. Like, let's just get out of the way this thing that you either love or hate and move on. Because the reason I want to move on is what Colette was starting to talk about, which is the plot is couched in so much internalizations that are giving a context for everything, for every little phrase that's uttered. Like Ma will give one piece of dialogue, and now we're going to have a 5-page excursion into Ma's history, right? So the main context is what it's like to live in a district run by paramilitaries. We can assume the IRA, but there was apparently quite a few different groups in the 1970s. So how did that sort of paramilitary influence or power in the district influence middle sister, the narrator, her family, the main plot themes? So yeah, just sort of opening it up and like, let's just get into the troubles.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because from a British perspective, we were very aware of the troubles. And even when it came across to the mainland, and I don't know if I've ever said this before, but I was walking through Birmingham on the night of the Birmingham pub bombings. So it was very real, and so with the whole of that sort of period was punctuated by things that happened. So it's, we lived through that, and so it was very, very. It was the whole sort of troubles in Northern Ireland was a very sort of visceral time for us. But what I liked about this book was that that was the backdrop. It wasn't all about that. We got underneath it. We got into one family and one person in particular. And I loved the way that she just dropped these things in that would have been horrifying for us at the time. And it was just part of normal life. So, there's a knock at the door and there's guys in balaclavas and big guns and saying, coming to ask you a question. And you think, wow, but that's just how life was. And almost she treated the death of people like just part of what happened. Like towards the end, she was talking about her longest friend. And I had 3 further encounters. One was at a wedding in the countryside, about wearing dark glasses. Then I met her a year after her wedding, this time at the funeral of her husband. 3 months on from that, I went to her own funeral when they buried her with her husband. And that's just matter of fact. That's just what happened. There's no horror. Look at this. Isn't this awful? Sort of thing. That's just what happened.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And it's so fitting in the character that, middle sister is the ideal character to convey this also matter-of-factly, because she's, that walking while reading, and the conscious choice, well, conscious or unconscious, the choice to distance herself from all of this and from her emotions, to make herself numb to all of it, because that's the way you get through living in a society where violence is the norm. So, and that paragraph, I thought of that same paragraph. It's heartbreaking, because this is her longest friend, who we don't even get to know longest friend's name, because you can't attach names to people, because to attach names to people is to actually identify them and to imbue them with emotion and to care about them, and therefore to risk losing them and to have to grieve once you lose them. And that's all too horrifying, because then you live in a constant state of grief. And I think that's so much of what the book was about. This is a woman who decided she had to be other, even though she wouldn't admit that she was one. What was it? One of the why am I
Beyond the
blanking?
Pales. Beyond the
Yeah,
Pale.
she was a beyond the pale because she embodied what a beyond the pale was because she had discovered how to keep herself distant. This was her way.
And it's funny because you say that to survive, she had to make herself numb. But the thing that longest friend tells her when they're at the bar is basically that there is the other way to do it is to engage with it full force, either as a gossip or as a renouncer as well. And that's something that I kept thinking about because so I was reading a review about this, and I just want to quote Claire Kilver from The Guardian because I think she just puts it very well. How all of this context of the Troubles, you never actually see any violence between the paramilitaries and the police, right? Like that's all in the backdrop. But what you are seeing as a consequence of that is the oppressiveness of tribalism, of conformism, of religion, of patriarchy, of living with widespread distrust and permanent fear. And I think she put that really well because the middle sister has a choice on how she wants to react to that. And when you have a community that's saturated in anger and fear and grief, anyone who isn't engaging with a thing that is so oppressive and so big is considered beyond the pale, right? Because like some of the people that are beyond the pale, like Shiny Girl, what is Shiny Girl's greatest sin? That she somehow finds a way to be happy and find the positive in everything, despite the oppressive reality that we live in. That's why Shiny Girl's beyond the pale, because her ability to remain positive is seen as insane. And I think with middle sister, it's not just that she is escaping by reading while walking. That's what they pin it on. And the other thing that longest friend brings up a lot is she's like, you don't engage with the gossip. You think, and I think that is unnerving for people. When you live in this paranoid society, you want to know what people's thoughts are. And even if they're going to keep secrets from you, you want to see that they're making an effort to gossip, even if they're keeping secrets, because just in making the effort, they're engaging with the community. They're proving a certain allegiance to a tribe. And by not doing that, she's not committing to their tribe. That's why they're so threatened by her.
Well, also, she's not engaging in self-care. That really struck me.
Yeah.
She's walking around because... And was it longest friend who was the first person to say that to her? I can't remember, but I do remember that's when it really struck me. That's what really bothers people. And in that way, she's like Shiny Girl because Shiny Girl manages to be happy, even though everything is so disastrous constantly. And middle sister walks around as if they live in a safe place, so safe that she can walk and read. As if she can just ignore her surroundings and not have to be constantly vigilant. And that the weight of constant vigilance, it is such a weight. And to have to see someone who seems as if she doesn't have a care, she's so carefree that she can walk and read, is an affront to everything that everyone else lives with.
And the first person who brings it up to answer your question is actually third brother-in-law when they're running, remember?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I think the fact that it was third brother-in-law was very clever. That's the thing, is this is one of those writers where it's like, it's very challenging. Yeah, but the more you think about it, the more you're like, what a clever little author we got here on our hands, guys. Because it's like I see you, Anna Burns. Because remember third brother-in-law? He's the one who tends to think that women are like the superior of the genders and that he wants to be like dominated by women and having women like boss him around. So for him, it's a big deal. It's a big concern for him to push back on anything that a woman is choosing to do. When normally, he'll only push back a little bit so that they clobber him over the head with their like edicts. That's his whole thing. His whole thing is like, we're going to run 9 miles to have the woman go, nope, 7. And that's it. That's like his thing. So for him to push back, because when she started saying like pushing back and she don't want to have this conversation, he wouldn't let it go. Like he was very concerned about it in a way that I thought just sort of like brought that into focus. Because if it had been Ma, we would have discredited it as like another one of her histrionics, right? And when it's longest friend first, well, she's a renouncer. So like, of course, she's like Team Milkman over here, right? Yeah. Like there's like a sense of having another person who is almost beyond the pale. Remember, third brother-in-law is almost beyond the pale, but not quite beyond the pale. Be the person who does it. It just gives a lot more weight to it. Like, and when you read that scene, you don't realize it until you get to the end. And then you're like reflecting on the book. And then you're like, third brother-in-law was a very important character, and it didn't seem like it at the time.
Yeah. He just seemed to be a member of the family, and but he kept coming back, didn't he? And there was a long period when she'd stopped running, and long period of the book where it didn't feature, but then she brought him back again
Mm-hmm.
when it was. And I loved the discussion of normality, and I think it was him that said, or somebody that said, Semtex is normal, but reading whilst walking isn't normal. And you just think, yes, but no, it's just kind of weird.
I've done it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
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 Of course.
I've definitely done it.
But yeah, in that context and in that environment, and as you're saying, Anise, that the fact that she doesn't engage makes people suspicious of her, and the fact that she reads whilst walking that nobody else does. There's something funny about this girl, and so they instantly sort of, and when she when Tablet's girl gets killed, they all turn against her because they think that she is the one that got the girl killed. So it's just like they're waiting for an opportunity to turn against her.
And think about the hierarchy there, that the person who gets killed, again, isn't a beloved member of the community. It's Tablet's girl that everyone, for some reason, tolerates, but also fears. Yeah. Like, oh, Tablet's girl's in the club. Everybody hide your drink. She's going to poison you. But, you know, that's just our life now.
Well, that was fascinating to me. The fact that they would threaten, the renouncers would threaten to do something about her, but somehow the threats would get, okay, we'll give her one more chance. She's going around trying to kill people. And that's kind of, okay, it's a situation we have to deal with, but it's not up there. It's tolerated.
It's tolerated. And it's funny because, like, what's not tolerated? Being a suspected informer without it even being confirmed, just because you went to the hospital. If you went to the hospital, then probably you're an informer now, so they kill you. Like it's nuts, right? Like, yeah.
That is weird. It's such a strange environment. And I think when you mentioned hierarchy, I think another thing that was done really well was the hierarchy of the sort of local thugs, the local enforcers, the renouncers, with their balaclavas and all this sort of stuff. And yet Milkman is like another level up. And when they said Milkman is a terrorist, it's like, whoa, really? A terrorist? And they're the people walking around with balaclavas and guns and stuff. But Milkman is up there, and you feel that there is this sort of inbuilt hierarchy in that community.
And it's interesting too, because a lot of the themes have to do with gender, the role that then the pious women and the mothers who are not beyond the pale, the ones who are going to stitch you up when you need to get stitched up, who are going to hide you in their house when the police come looking for you, the role that they play, and how, for the most part, they're going to follow all the rules, but they'll rebel randomly to like save like real Milkman because they're all in love with him. Remember, there's 2 Milkmans for people who haven't read the book. Yeah. If you're listening to this and you haven't read the book, I don't know what you're doing because it's insane. You can't follow the conversation. The book
and Real Milkman, it's his other name his other non-name is just too long to use.
Yeah,
the man who loved
who doesn't love anyone.
Who doesn't love anyone, but it's even longer than that. Remember what it used to include Peggy? Oh my God, I love that storyline so much.
Yeah. So going back to like the gendered part of this, because so we've talked a lot about how the story is looking at the Troubles and it's looking at the tribal part of it, how she refuses to really engage in it. And the second part of this is the difficulty of being man or woman here is different. Men, it's just surviving, like with your life. And for women, there's something else going on here. And what happens to middle sister is very particular. So I don't know if one of you guys wants to sort of break down what happens to middle sister. Predation, like everything that happens with Milkman, like the way that the community and
the way that the community starts building the gossip.
Yes, that they're
building gossip that's
right.
Came out of Milkman's interest in her.
Yeah, accessory to predation, like that part of it. I don't know what you guys thought of it. Like, can you just sort of break it down, explain? Like, was it realistic to you or not?
Oh, yeah. I mean, in terms of, I thought it was a brilliant way to depict gossip, because that is the way gossip gets away from everyone. Something, and just the fact that this powerful man powerful, terrifying man, has an interest in middle sister, expresses his interest quite publicly because there's so much spying. Even just talking to her, talking to someone who's already on the edge of being beyond the pale. Somebody who people fear, and because people fear middle sister in a different way that they fear Milkman, obviously. They fear her because she's not one of them, because it feels like she's rejecting them. They're suspicious of her, so they're looking for a reason to build gossip around her. They're looking for a reason to shun her. And when Milkman singles her out, they start building. And doesn't first brother-in-law start the rumor?
Yeah.
And what fascinated me was nobody likes first brother-in-law, nobody respects first brother-in-law, but because this hierarchy of gossips, they're looking for a reason to badmouth middle sister because they're afraid of her. They latch onto it and start blowing it up to the point where even her mother accepts the gossip as truth. And part of it is, quite frankly, also because middle sister refuses to engage at all. Even when her mother's furious, she won't say yay or nay to her mother. And then when she finally does say, "Ma, none of it's true," her mother won't believe her. And it's just the build in what people are willing to believe. Nobody questions. And how many times does she actually meet him? There's the first time when she's walking and reading, and then she's running, and then she's in that whole thing with the cat head in the 10-minute zone, and then there are other men around. But it's those 3 meetings, right?
And then there's the fourth. The book starts with alluding to it by saying the first 3 times they met was a surprise. The 4th time wasn't.
Well, the 4th time was in that I was actually leaving it separate, because when she got in the van, you mean? Yeah. Because I'm thinking of the first 3 times. Those are the ones on which the gossip was built. So that by the time we get to their 4th meeting, she's just acquiesced. She's given up, and she gets in the van, and she actually initiates that contact in a sense, because even though he's sitting there waiting, she didn't have to get in that van, but she did, because the gossips won, at least in that moment. They didn't win the war, but they won that particular battle. So to me, that actually felt quite realistic. The way I thought it was brilliant. I mean, the whole world of gossip and why gossip evolves and how it takes on a life of its own and becomes the truth was fascinating.
It is, and in fact, it's just the 2 meetings, because the 2 meetings was when the gossip started, and
that's true.
And you just the fact that the first time that she mentions the click from the bushes or the click from the trees, and that they're being photographed, and you think, nobody pays attention to that. They're being photographed all the time, and yet it's just something that they're used to. And so there's no surprise that there's gossip about everything and rumor about everything.
And Longest Friend talks about that too, where she's like, "You've always been photographed, you're just ignoring it for a long time with your habit of reading while walking." She's like, "Of course you're always photographed. You had a brother, 2 brothers, and like all of this." She lists, you've already had her connections.
Yeah.
Well, and also what I also loved was the way Anna Burns used third brother-in-law in that very first run, when middle sister says, "Well, he's clueless." In a way, she feels a kinship with him, because she feels as if he doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't, and yet he says to her, "Just ignore that." He also says, "Just ignore it." When she's like, "Didn't you hear that click?" It's like, there are always clicks. So he reveals to her, in fact, I know what's going on. I just choose not to engage with it. So I thought that was a really nice touch from the very beginning, to establish that she actually is alone in her denial, in a sense, because even the person she thought was like her isn't. He knows what's going on more than she does.
And there is this way, well, we've been talking a little bit about how it's gendered. The way that she's being preyed on is very resonant with what's happening right now with Me Too. Like in the beginning of the book, she kind of is like, we didn't have a language for that then. You couldn't say violence had been done if you hadn't been physically touched, if no one had verbally threatened you. There was no way to describe what was happening. And I love the way that she describes that jelly-like feeling in your legs when you panic. I feel like almost every woman has experienced that. Yep. I knew it. I was like, oh, that is such an accurate description of what that feels like.
It very much so. And the whole idea of we didn't have a language for this. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, and even then, because she actually makes a mention of it wasn't yet the 80s when things were going to be were talked about. But even in the 80s, we didn't have a language for it the way we do now. So I really identified with that whole idea of if you hadn't been touched, if it wasn't explicit, there was nothing to complain about.
Right.
It was just part of your world. And even when I was in business, even when I was a lawyer working in the entertainment industry, it was very much that way. If certain things weren't explicitly done to you, if it was just part of being a woman in business, and you just accepted it, you know. And now we can look back and say that was wrong.
Yeah.
But back then it was just, it's just part of being a woman, you know.
Yeah.
And they didn't even have that. It was just, this is the way the world works.
Yeah.
In fact, remember at the end with Somebody McSomebody, when when the renouncer are putting him in the kangaroo court and they're trying to charge him with something, they can only think in terms of rape, not rape. So the charge they give him is 1/4 rape. You know, like it can't be
the most bizarre thing.
The most bizarre thing, because they can't even conceive of another way to frame the harm that he had been doing. Right. Well, rape technically didn't occur, but he did in some way was a predator. He was. So what is it then? I guess we can call it a quarter rape. Like things can only still be put in terms of rape.
Yeah, and that makes us better. You know, that makes us better than things used to be.
Right.
Because
yeah. This is progress. Rape. Yes. We now allow for quarter rapes. This is now progress. Yeah. Yeah. And you know, so there's this side of it. There's like how well, let's continue on the female side, because I want to jump to the male side, because what happens with Maybe Boyfriend is the male side of it. But with Middle Sister, there's also that moment with the groupies in the bathroom, which gives you more insight into all the different ways that a woman can be, but it's still very either you're a holy woman, you're a married woman with kids, or you're a group and you're a hanger-on to the renouncers, right? That scene made me laugh, I gotta say.
Oh my God, that was that. And it was funny. I love it. Whenever I think to myself, well, she throws this stuff in at the end that she didn't set us up for. I'm like, yeah, she did. Because in the beginning, she plants the seed up in just 1 or 2 lines, but in a really startling way. She, you know, well, when Somebody McSomebody, you know, cornered me in the bathroom, and I forget exactly what she said in the beginning, but like, oh my God. And then she gets us there. Yeah. And I thought it was going to be this threatening, horrifying, she actually does get rape scene, and it turns out to be just a comical, all of these women coming out of the bathroom stalls and beating the crap out of him. It was great.
But they're beating the crap out of him, not because he pulled a gun on a woman. That's not why. That's normal here. The reason is because how dare he come into the women's bathroom? This is a sacred space where we make up our faces and put on perfume. Yeah.
But that's what made it so funny.
Yes.
Because it's still not about violence against women. It's about you invaded our space, which is as much violence as they can acknowledge. If you think about it, that's what it is. They can't acknowledge more than that because everything else is normal. You know, that's the indignity they're allowed to be upset about.
And it goes back to tribes.
Invaded the bathroom. Yep.
Yeah, you're of the man tribe. Do not enter the woman tribe. Right? Like
you broke the rules.
Yeah, you broke the rules.
You invaded the little bit of space that we're allowed to have.
Yeah. Yeah. Gerald, did you want to add something?
No, thank you.
Okay. So I want to then move to the guy's side of things, because what happens with Maybe Boyfriend is then the male side of things, because he is also affected by rumor. And there's a big section of the book that's about how he's being stressed out with the rumors about him as an informer. She's being stressed out with the rumors about her as a mistress to the milkman, and they're not able to talk or reconcile these things. And then there's a whole other layer, which is that Maybe Boyfriend is also closeted. There's so much going on there. Yeah. So what did you guys, Gerald, what did you think of the way that the rumors unfolded about maybe boyfriend. There's a is there okay? I think there's an interesting parallel with middle sister. I want to see if you can like take us there. Like,
okay,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
oh, I don't know. Yeah, it's quite interesting that a lot of the early section of the book is about this damn supercharger, this piece of a car that he gets, which has got a flag on it, and I thought, you know, and that's when it really started to annoy me, the whole language, the way she writes, the repetition, going, oh no, I'm about the supercharger, but then it's that little flag, and it's a little flag on the front of the supercharger that means so much, and it creates such tension amongst the people and amongst his friends that, well, you can't have that in your house. You cannot have that flag in your house.
But it didn't have a flag,
yes.
right?
It didn't have a flag.
It didn't have a. It usually has a flag, but the flag part wasn't on it. But just the fact that it was supposed to have a flag meant he shouldn't have it in the house.
Yeah. No, it wasn't even that. It was that this car, typically a Bentley, somewhere on the car there is a flag, not on the supercharger itself. So somebody else, that's what it was.
Got
it
the
was
flag.
Yeah.
Really?
And it wasn't just about the flag. It's the flag, and also you are not supposed to like anything that the country over the sea is a source of pride for them. So like if it's just some casual, like, this is just some like back bacon from England, that was okay. But if it's like something that is their source of pride, something that is about their dominance, something that is about their superiority, no. Now you've crossed the line. You can't indulge in that. You can't indulge in the Bentley.
Yeah. Yeah. So instantly he was, because he didn't see that, he didn't understand that, and to him it was just a piece of a car. So again, he was sort of outside the norm of his friends, and they couldn't understand why he was like this. He was a little bit strange. So being associated with middle sister, who was also strange. So you seem to get male and female suspicion of these two characters for different reasons. So in a way they were perfect for each other, but in a way they were totally wrong for each other.
And there's also, I think, the added part of, in the same way that within her district, middle sister is considered a beyond the pale, or at some point was on her way to that because of her reading while walking, because of her inability to engage with gossip. I think also with maybe boyfriend, part of it is the suspicion that he might be homosexual. Why is he always hanging out with the guy that cooks? Why? Remember, middle sister has these thoughts as well. She's a little disconcerted by the fact that maybe boyfriend likes sunsets and likes to cook and is always protecting this other guy who everyone kind of knows is definitely closeted chef, right? So there's this sense as well as, because he's threatening, the community really wants to go all in on that gossip, really wants to continue to perpetuate it in the same way that it did with middle sister, where if he had a higher standing, he might have been able to have flexed a little more muscle and punted off the rumor, right? Yeah,
there's definitely that parallel there. Yeah, he does play that same role. And he, like her also, although he's more aware than she is, I think, that he is almost beyond the pale, but he's stubborn and he digs in his heels. He's like, I don't care. I love this piece of machinery. I'm not giving it up, you know, and I'll just keep moving it around. And he's creating different places. The way he creates different places to hide the supercharger was just so, it's his little act of defiance that was wonderful, you know, and yet she's terrified, you know, it terrifies her.
Yeah. As you said that, it made me think, isn't that also a parallel with the way that he hides Chef in his life? And how he's still going to have his secret relationship with Chef. It's like, and it's consistent with his personality.
Very much so.
You start digging in this book, you're just like, Hannah Burns, I see you.
Seriously, she sets things up so beautifully.
Yeah.
Like, and she pays it off. You know, she sets us up for this without us even realizing it. And so when it happens, you know, that scene with Chef was brilliant and unexpected. And yeah, it was lovely because it didn't feel forced. It surprised me. But then I thought, oh, no, wait. She set us up for this in the very beginning, just with having middle sister have her own subconscious doubts.
Yeah. And the thing is, her subconscious doubts to us in 2018 or 2019, reading the story, were like, that's not a big deal. Sunsets are fine. Cooking is fine.
Yeah.
But at that time, in that context, it was, it is a sign of his lack of willingness to conform is something that she is picking up on correctly. That isn't necessarily the case now. And
what she's more worried about is that people will put him in the same category as Chef, thinking, but that's not, and she's thinking, but that's not who he is. So I'm afraid that he's going to get punished for appearances, for not conforming.
Right.
When in fact, if he gets punished, it's because he is who he is, which is so buried and wonderful that you don't just get punished for appearances, you get punished for who you are.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, Chef stabbed someone, so that was unexpected.
Love that.
Yeah.
Very good.
Just stabbed a renouncer. Yeah. So that was definitely, I think that was one of the scenes where I was like sitting bolt upright. I was like, whoa, this just came alive. Yeah. So we keep talking about okay. So when I reached out saying, hey, what do you guys want us to talk about? Because there's so many things to talk about. So another listener who just joined the podcast, Perry, said that she wants us to talk about all the feminism, female independence, and also shame. There was this really long, beautiful passage about how shame is the most powerful of emotions. I can't remember though. Can you guys remember why was it that she felt shame in that? It was when her mom yelled at her, right? When she said, gee whiz, Ma, and Ma put her in her place. Was that
Ma yelled so much? Which time was
that? This was when Ma was basically like, you think you're above me. You think you see things I don't see. I've been living in this world for a long time. I've been navigating this world for a long time. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. That's basically what she says.
Wait a second.
That's basically her screed. Yeah.
It really is. And and she is, and as a mother, I've said those words like, I've lived longer than you have. And so that rang quite true to me. But the whole idea of shame, and it's shame, and it's not just particular to women in this world, in Anna Burns' world, but in terms of talking about women, well, I think for all the characters, shame is permissible. Shame is one emotion that it's even necessary to be able to fit into the hierarchy, to fit in, to find your place. You need to feel that shame to keep you in your place. So that's one way that it's definitely used, and why it's the most important, perhaps why it's the most important of emotions.
But she also talks about how shame also is at the core of so many of the violences that happen. Like, I don't know who's revving their engine outside my window here, but
maybe boyfriend.
Maybe boyfriend. He just loves his car. But so, there's a whole passage about how shame is the thing that could drive you to kill someone else, to kill yourself. Like there's a whole long passage about that I thought was beautiful. And the only thing I didn't agree with when I read that, but this is now just my personal opinion. So she goes that it's even more powerful than fear. Nothing's more powerful than fear, in my opinion. No. That's the only time I was like, no, fear is like the ultimate.
But then in her world, where death was a glance away, almost, a misstatement of something. There wasn't much fear around. It was. There was threats, and I think the various paramilitaries were always there, and even maybe from Milkman and his people, there seemed to be a sort of deference from the lower levels of people to Milkman and the guys that he had around him. But I don't think there wasn't much fear. It was just that sort of. They got used to that feeling and living in that environment.
Fear was a constant. A constant is something you kind of shove to the background. True, and you don't really, it's just there. So it just becomes so part of your being that it feels as if it doesn't exist, when in fact it's just a constant. And for Milkman is the one who brought fear to the fore, because she, and do you remember that part near the end when somebody's got the gun, and all of a sudden middle sister thinks to herself, well, I'm going to die anyway. I'm likely going to die young, so I might as well do something right now. And that's when she goes for the gun and gets it away from him. So it is that feeling of, well, death is all around me. Death is all around me. Fear is a constant.
I don't know. As I hear you guys discussing this, I think I just had like a little, I'm really glad Perry brought up fear, because not for shame, because I think Gerald's right that the way that fear manifests here isn't really the way that we typically think about it, because people would become renouncers knowing that they basically were giving themselves a shelf life of like 2 or 3 years, right? Yeah. And yet they did that because what was worse than that was the shame of not fighting back, of not being a part of your tribe, right? Like there's a sense in which you are going to do things, even if they are objectively terrifying, because that's how you belong. And if you don't, then you're a coward. That's worse. Then you are a defender. That's worse. I think that might be the perspective of shame here. And going a little bit even sort of beyond that, Tablets Girl. Remember the big revelation about Tablets Girl was that she's not angry, she's afraid. So somebody who fully stared at the real threats, at fear in the face, who was like, this is insane, this is a terrible, terrifying place to live in, and I'm scared of it, went beyond the pale. Like somebody who couldn't just grapple with those fears and then say, this is what I need to do to survive, and who knew that the most important thing was conforming, and if you don't conform, then you are shamed. Yeah, the person who fully embraced the fear and wrote a 13-letter missive about her fears is Tablets Girl.
Yeah. Well, and what was fascinating about that her rationale too was that I maybe I misread this, but one of my takeaways from learning about her and her fear was that I need to remind people that death is something to fear, and I just thought that was the most deranged yet fascinating and rational reason for doing what she was doing. Yeah. I need to remind people that death is not something that we should just take as a given. Right. That you should be afraid of this. Yeah. That was brilliant.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Yeah, especially because, going back to the narrative style, there's a way in which Anna Burns is giving logic to the absurd that you're like, that's a crazy thing that I can kind of see now, that I understand now. And also the way that it's written, it's very sort of like dreamlike. Like we know it's probably Belfast, but no point is the city named. The countries aren't even named. It's only England is the country over the water, right? Yeah. Like it's never named in any way. So it almost like if you had no knowledge of geopolitics on Earth at all and you read this, you would think it's a completely fictional setting, right? And I think because of that, it's better positioned to resonate with all of the anxieties that are happening now, the xenophobic anxieties, the Me Too anxieties, everything that we're preoccupied with now, it's still resonating because she's not tethering it by saying, this is Belfast in the 1970s. By not saying that, by opening it up, it feels more eternal.
Yeah. And yet it's incredibly specific, which is what helps us identify with everything so much. This is a very specific world populated by real people, populated by real events, and it feels like even just thinking about that cat head, and wrapping it up and wanting to give it a piece of green, and that whole scene, that's so real and so specific. But you're right, it could take place anywhere, and it does allow us to identify the core emotions and the core themes of the book and extend them to our own situations. And I think that's what makes the book, I think that's what made it a prize winner, quite frankly, that because it resonates in any time.
Yeah.
It's very dystopian, isn't it? And the not mentioning names or towns or countries means that could be transplanted anyway. It could be a Margaret Atwood. If we didn't know it was real, it's got that sort of otherworldly this is just so strange, and you've got the groups of men walking around, and the the paramilitaries, and it's just it's just a very strange time, and you forget it. It's what, 40 years ago now, and
Jeez.
Yeah.
it's good to be reminded about it.
Yeah. And I think also it won the award for everything that you guys just said. And also because the voice and the middle sister's voice, it's like her wit, like her ability to really like see things, see the truth of things, and reject all the histrionics and kind of roll her eyes sometimes at things to her own detriment, to her own downfall. But her ability to do that is what makes us really want to see this world through her eyes. And also makes it funny sometimes because the way that she would like sum up what people were actually feeling was always funny. Like the anxieties about the feminist women, also known as the women with the issues, which had the
oh my God, that was hysterical.
Yeah. But then she's like that they were branded aborting homosexual insurrectionists. That's just funny. Like it's just funny.
And we sisters, I'm sorry, we sisters
Hilarious.
as a singular character gave such levity, where necessary levity, particularly near the end of the book, when Ma starts trying to get real Milkman, and all of that, Ma's been in your underwear drawer, and just we needed that at that point. We needed that light touch, to make it palatable.
And their precociousness, which was almost surreal, was funny. Like the things that they would get into, which is funny. Yeah.
And I like that. I like the little bits of humor surrounded by this terrible environment and things happening, and family members dying, and just they died. Okay, no big deal. But the sort of levity and the amusing things that she brings out is really clever.
Well, we're coming up on the hour, so I kind of want to get towards the ending because we keep talking about how bleak it is throughout the whole novel. But in my reading, it kind of ends on a hopeful, positive note, surprisingly. Like, wow. So what did you guys think? So how does it end, hopefully? Like, how do we know it's a hopeful ending? And did you like the ending?
I did, actually. I tend to like a more hopeful ending anyway, even if it's, and I like it. I like a hopeful yet open-ended ending. And I felt like that's what this was. And I found it fascinating yet apt that the ending focuses on someone else's dilemma, focuses on Ma's dilemma of how do I don't deserve him. I need to give him over to someone else because she's had more loss than I've had. And the fact that middle sister is able to set aside her infinite fury at her mother, who is so overly pious and so judgmental, and say, don't you see what they're doing to you? You are just as entitled to anyone else, because if you were to go along with their rationale, you would never even date. When would you be allowed your first date? You are entitled to this love. And it's funny, middle sister, before all of this happened, before Milkman, before she discovered maybe boyfriend's secret, it's not about love. Life isn't about love. Life is about actually deferring love. And marrying somebody other than your real love, because God forbid you get your real love and you lose that real love. And now she's saying to Ma, no, go for it. And yet it's not about middle sister. It's about, the ending is about someone else. We get so wrapped up, and we get the whole history of Peggy and of, Milkman, and everybody being in love with Milkman and who he really is. And the fact that he's not somebody who never loved anybody. It's that he never could love anybody but Peggy. We get so wrapped up in that storyline that middle sister kind of deflects attention away from herself. And yet by the end, I felt like, oh, this is her way of letting us know that maybe she's opened herself up a little bit more.
Yeah, and that final scene with the brother-in-law was really hilarious. That I don't. It just seemed, but it seemed right. It seemed somehow it didn't stand out as being, didn't fit in with the rest of the story. It's back into normal life, and she's had this whole sort of adventure almost, but she's come back to running, and he's just the same as he always is, arguing about the length of the run they were going to have, and that sort of thing, and I really enjoyed that last scene. I thought it was a really fitting end.
Yeah. And I also like the focus on Ma, because it was a line that said that Ma is sprouting green shoots. There's this idea that the hopefulness that comes out here is the idea that things can change. Here is Ma, who's been pretty rigid throughout the book, right? Here she is opening up. Here is, because one of the, you can say middle sister is, for very good self-preservation reasons, extremely selfish, right? When real Milkman is like, you need to nurture this gift that we sisters have. She's like, why is that on me? Why should I? Please, that makes no sense. Like, she has this sense of like, why should I care about anything else ever? And here she's caring enough about Mom's transformation, about her need to feel beautiful and to feel like she's worthy of love, that she calls first sister, who she like hates right now, right? Like, she's willing to make that sacrifice, and that call is very careful. She's like, don't mention Milkman. Like, don't say anything. So it's going to set off first sister to get her to come here, to get her to make Ma feel better. And this is the first time that we see middle sister caring about someone else, because we never said about anyone.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, she won't let herself. She won't. And you're right, it is selfish. I hadn't thought about it that way, but it is a very selfish way to live. And so you're right, she's thinking outside herself for the first time in the book.
Yeah. And it ends with her running. That's great. Like, she's returning to herself and she's growing.
Yeah.
Okay, there's so much more we can talk about, but I just feel like we're over the hour now. So we're going to have to like cut it because we can't go on forever. Because I want to talk about all the little romances that were buried in there. They were so cute.
Oh my God, there's so many little, the tendrils that just extend from the main plot in this book are fascinating. You're right, it's so interesting that a book that, again, I probably would not read twice is so engaging, and we could talk about it forever.
Yeah.
It's really a tribute to her talent and her imagination.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me, so how like Infinite Jest is like, if you read Infinite Jest, go brag about it online, right? Like, that's like the thing, that's like the joke. So I actually did read Infinite Jest a bunch of years ago. I really enjoyed it. Never going to reread it because it was so challenging. Like, when it's, and the thing is, readers do want to be challenged to a certain degree. Like, you don't want to be patronized. You don't want things, but also on the other hand, it's like, oh, I need to breathe. So
yeah,
I think that's the thing, isn't it? That it becomes hard work sometimes, but not with this book particularly. It was at the start, and somebody said to me, did you enjoy it? And I said, at about a quarter of the way through, or a bit less than that, I was just, it was really, walking through treacle for me. It was so hard for me, and yet. And because of this podcast, I thought, well, I must finish up, must keep on reading it. And actually, you start to accept how it's written and stop railing against it and say, this is how it is, and this is the voice, and then you start to enjoy the story behind that. So I'm still not sure. I'm still in two minds as to whether the voice and the style is obstructive or is too obstructive. It sort of gets kind of wearing, but so I see I'm still in two minds. I hope that by the time we'd finished this, I'd have settled on one or the other, but I'm still conflicted.
I'll push back with, I agree that it was very obstructive in places and very difficult. However, so let's say we got our wish and it was a little bit easier. How exactly would we want her to make it easier? Because we enjoy her ability to make things both funny and bleak at the same time. We enjoy the way that she brings to things. We enjoy the way that she will plant things and stories within stories. So really, it's just, can you not have massive sentences and put more periods in there. Like that's really the only thing that we want. Like the only thing we really, really want is like, can you break a paragraph a little bit more often, and can you stop with the run-on sentences? Because a lot of this light and life that we're enjoying can only happen really with this voice. We just, wish he wasn't testing our fluid memory so much.
Like hugely testing.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it is just that's it's what you see in front of you that becomes so difficult. And if you can get over that little picket fence of the style and the writing style, get over that, then the stuff behind it is lush and green and interesting and fascinating and a great place to be.
Yeah. Okay. We're over the hour, so I'm gonna have to cut it.
Yeah.
But this is great because there's so much more to talk about. So if listeners are like, you definitely should have talked about this more, like, I don't know, maybe third brother and shiny girl's romantic relationship, or some of the other little beautiful bits that are in here, then please leave comments and engage with us, and we will get back to you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk about that stuff more on the Facebook page.
Yes. Our Facebook group is pretty active, like considering like people are in it. So I hope it grows.
Yeah.
So next month, we're reading Exit West by Mohsin Hamid. As you read the book, let us know your thoughts on Twitter or in the Facebook group we just mentioned. If you're on Twitter, use the hashtag LRH Book Club. And yeah, join the Facebook group because that's where I heard from Tracy and Perry. So it's the best way to engage with us, and maybe we'll shout you out on the show. So by the way, I heard that people who don't leave reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spreaker are possibly beyond the pale. I don't know. It's just something I heard. You can't really make this stuff up. Also, we need to buy sequins and lace to play at international ballroom dancing with We Sisters. Support our dancing and podcast expenses at patreon.com/literary roadhouse. Every bit helps. All right. That was a really great discussion, guys.
That was.
Thank you. Yeah, it really helped bring out the meat of the story behind the stuff at the front. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, this was an absolute pleasure. This is the highlight of my weekend when I get to talk to you guys about whatever we've been reading.
Yeah, I can't wait for next month. Exit West supposed to be really good too.
Is it? Okay.
All right. Bye, guys.
When you say really good.
No, good, like good. I think, is this the one or is Frankenstein in Baghdad? I can't remember. I was reading both of them. There's some around the same time, but there's one that's like a romance in a war zone. So fun.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye. See you.